So first, there's a headmaster here named Jason. He's from Great Heart, San Antonio. He blessed my heart as I was walking in, and I'm like, okay, I gotta speak in a minute. You're messing, my tears are coming. I'm trying to keep myself together. Then I get back here and they say, I call him Pano. He says, Pano will be introducing. I was like, say what? My friend from St. John's, who is just a very dear friend to me. So I'm struggling with emotions as I look at the goodness of God today, and I'm excited. One of the reasons why Jason, I can't remember his last name, touched me so much this morning as he was talking about how Great Hearts has been really blessed by my workshops and trainings. And as he was sharing, and as I'm seeing all the people here, it became overwhelming because my journey here has been a hard one. Very hard. And I went through spaces where I thought no one would want to hear what I have to say. But for God to make it so that these words are given directly to K-12 children, I don't know if you fully understand how amazing that feels. My research was not for me just to get a PhD. I didn't even want to go to college, actually, when I was young. I was not a good student. So I'm going to tell you my story today and how drama saved my life. And hopefully it'll help you in the classroom. So that I'm here is a miracle. And so I ended up, those degrees were also not ambitions. It's just kind of how things happened. I started a drama club after my bachelor's, and I fell in love with drama in education and found out about NYU's program. So I did it. It was all kind of like this is interesting. Then I started teaching music, and I said, I really need to deepen my understanding of music education. So I went and got my master's in music education, and then I started teaching a great books class. I was like, dang, I really need somebody to train me on how to really dive deep into these texts that are so amazing. I got to go to St. John's. That's how that happened, and that's how it really happened. And when I came across St. John's, I even told the lady on the phone as I was asking her about their program, I said, I can't get another degree. I don't want to go back to school anymore. And I told her that, and then her voice said, well, that's the only way you're going to get this. And I was like, so I did, and it was the best decision ever. But I went through and then after all of that, I ended up at the University of Maryland. My mom, you need to get your PhD. I'm not going back to anybody's school, Mommy. And then I said, I'm done. And then my mom has this phrase, and she says, the more you have, the more you can give your children. And she you start talking about, at the time I didn't have a husband or child, but I wanted those things. So she got me with that. I said, okay. So I went and I got this PhD in English education, and my goal was to show how the arts can be used to help children, students of all ages, get into really difficult literature, especially classical literature, or the works of the Canon. And so I was focused. I was accepted into the PhD program under that, and I was ready. I had been invited to be a part of different research projects, and I had been invited to be a grad assistant, and everything looked great. And then I began to fall deeper in love with classical education. And this warring within me happened. Arts and education, classical education. I was just kind of torn. And classical education was like pulling me harder because I saw such a lasting effect on children that the arts could feed into, but classical education became the priority to me. Does that make sense? It seems so much more important than that. But it didn't get rid of the arts. Arts was a part of it, but the foundation was in classical education. And so I'm sharing this with one of the professors at Maryland. And she said, you talk about this all the time. Like every time you're in the office, this is all you talk about. And this is what you need to research. And I said, they're gonna kill me. Like if I changed from arts and education, which was like a really popular thing at the time, to classical education, with the political climate we've been in for it seems like centuries, I'll never get out. And she says, but you have to follow your heart or you'll never be happy. So I made that fateful decision. And I changed my research focus, and my advisor said, I don't want to work with you anymore. There was a group of professors, very popular, influential professors in the field of education, who basically blackballed me. Don't work with her. Why would she want to research this stuff about dead white men? This is not relevant to her people. And I walked alone, trying to get through that doctoral program without any help. But God is good. Eventually, and very long story made short, God connected me. The dean of the College of Education found out about my situation, and the head of my program did. I didn't tell anyone. Only a few professors knew, but I was very helpless. And it wasn't that they valued classical education, they just valued my right as a woman to research whatever I wanted to research. And those two ladies took me on, and that's how I got out. And I'm so grateful to Dr. Wiseman and Dr. Hultgren, who believed in me as a human being who had the right to research something that was so important to me. And I fell in love with classical education because I saw something happen, and I feel this way about the arts. I saw something happen in students as they engaged with the literature that I needed as I struggled through school from literally pre-K through 12th grade. I think it's because I wanted to wonder. I wanted to think critically. I wanted to discuss my feelings and thoughts about the human existence. I didn't want to just fill in the blanks. And so I think that's where it happened for me. And then I fell in love with the arts because it became a tool to engage the most difficult student. The arts can reach every student. And no matter what your demographic is in your school, whether you have 50-50, only one chocolate drop in the room, or a whole bunch of chocolate drops in the room, or no chocolate drops in the room, theater, drama, the arts will reach every child. It reached me. It is what kept me from giving up on life. And it became my North Star. And I think a lot of this is because theater is instinctive. It is a human instinct, and Aristotle really explains this, and I want to share this quote. I love Aristotle, and I have this phrase, many of you all who know me, when I really like a male author, even if they're dead, I'll say, oh my gosh, this is my boyfriend. And my husband says, babes, totally cool, they're dead, I'm good with it. And then he says, well, my girlfriend's Madame Curie. You know, he's a scientist, so I'm like, oh God, now you're competing. But anyway, this is what Aristotle says. I love him so much. From childhood, a man has an instinct for representation. And in this respect differs from the other animals that he is far more imitative and learns his first lessons by representing things. And then there is the enjoyment people always get from representations. What happens in actual experience proves this, for we enjoy looking at accurate likenesses of things which are themselves painful to see, obscene beasts, for instance, and corpses. The reason is this. Learning things gives great pleasure not only to philosophers, but also in the same way to all other men, though they share this pleasure only to a small degree. The reason why we enjoy seeing likenesses is that as we look, we learn and infer what each is. For instance, that is so-and-so. So, kids grow up being dramatic. They play make-believe. My daughter is always pretending to do something. She likes to mimic me. Mommy, I've been talking to my dolls, and I told them, Mommy's not gonna be traveling very much because I can't stand being away from you, so I'm only gonna travel once a month. This is totally a speech I gave to my husband. And she was mimicking this with her dolls. In the classroom, you see kids doing make-believe. I called my children this morning. Hi guys, I miss you, I can't wait to see you, what are you doing? We're playing Elements. Elements is some make-believe game they made up as superheroes that have control of the elements. But they're make-believe. This is not a play, but it is a play. I like watching it. Psh, psh, I'm fire. I'm a butterfly. Shh. You know, and so, but this is all make-believe, and in their mind, this is all real. Like, what if we channeled that and put it into some good literature? Can you imagine what child you would reach? I have taught all types of children. I have taught children from upper middle class, and I've taught children whose parents died of heroin overdoses. And I've never failed to see drama reach every child, and especially draw them in to literature that seems disconnected from them. This is why I love drama. This is why I was torn between classical education and drama and education, because I saw both of them very powerful, but classical education is the foundation. Drama is the tool. And in my research, I was able to show what that actually means. But before I tell you my story about my research on how I use drama in a great books class, and I hope that what I share with you gives you ideas on what to do in your own classes, I want to give you a little history on theater in the Black community, because one thing I want people to understand when I talk about the Black community, and this is important because sometimes if we end up with Black people in our classrooms and we're teaching in a classical school, it's hard to show them how this connects to them too. So this is very important for you to hear. A little history, a little rundown. It's very small because I know I don't have a lot of time, right? So the first thing I want to tell you is theater is not new to the Black community. We didn't learn theater when we came to America. I want to share that with you. Just put that in the back of your mind. We came with the arts. This is not a music presentation, but just as an example. It is said that a lot of enslaved people, when they got here, their job was to entertain the master's guests with music. Because the instruments from the West looked like the instruments they used in Africa and were played the same. So they already knew how to play violins and guitars and things like that. And they would play the music. It was very natural. All types of handcrafts, they were doing that in Africa. So when they came here, they became the seamstresses and so on. And it is the same thing with the arts. And we know this to be true because we have Terence the African, the great the playwright from ancient Rome and taken from Ethiopia and brought into ancient Rome. And at that time, Ethiopia was not just the East African country as we know it today. It spanned the continent. It was an African empire. And he was educated classically by his master, and he immediately begins to write plays. Why? Because he already knew how to write plays. He already understood drama. I even went back even farther, like what I know the history of ancient Roman plays, ancient Greek plays, and I know that the whole history of theater begins with mankind trying to dramatize spirituality, the gods, whatever faith they had, before Christianity and the Passion plays. I know that. So I go on over to the continent of Africa and I find they did the same thing. They were maybe dramatizing Inyame, the great god of Western Africa, Ghana, or whoever else, or Osiris, or Isis. Everything was liturgy, pageantry, dramatizing their personal beliefs. It happened in the West, it happened in Africa. And when my ancestors crossed the waters to come into America, they still had this love for the arts. And we see it. We see like this instant gravitation to whatever the art culture was in America. Ira Aldridge, Howard University has a theater named Ira Aldridge Theater. He was a classically trained Black actor, born in New York. He wasn't enslaved, but he would use his popularity to speak against slavery. The sad part, though, even though he wasn't in the South, America would not let him act the way he wanted to. He didn't want to do slapstick. He didn't want to be the dancing monkey. He wanted to be a Shakespearean actor, or what have you. He wanted to be a respected actor, and America wouldn't give it to him. So he goes to Europe, and he becomes world famous. Or Paul Robeson, very similar story. The son of an escaped slave goes on to be this great Shakespearean actor, known for playing Othello. I'm sharing these with you so that when your families that look like me have an attitude that you're teaching classical, you can break this down for them. These are some tools for you to put in your back pocket. Let me tell you about how this connects to all of us. We're all here. And so these little examples are ways to say, this theater is for you. And I could go on and on talking about classically trained actors and actresses who valued these Greek plays, these Shakespearean plays, and so on. I could go all the way up to Chadwick Boseman. If your family still want to get upset with you, so let me tell you about Chadwick. God rest him, who got a grant to go study classical theater from Howard University. And what did he do with that training? Was he forgetting his heritage? Did he start his own black theater? No. He used it to tell black stories in a way that everyone could appreciate and touched so many lives in his very short life using the theater. So when you have that little cute black boy in your room, I don't know why we gotta read this. You can show him a picture of the Black Panther. And you can tell that child, this is for all of us. So that's a little history on the connection of this to all of us. And so I want to say this quote by Shakespeare. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts. That's that instinct, right? Everything's a dramatization. If you're a person who reads the Bible, God would even ask prophets, dramatize this fact that I'm about to destroy the whole country. God is an artist, right? Drama is everywhere. So we have this instinct, right? We have this information that this type of learning is for all of us. Many of you all know me and my thoughts, and I wish I could talk about that a little bit more, but get the book, The Black Intellectual Tradition, about how classics and the canon connect to Black history. It is an integral part of our heritage. And now we've heard how classical theater is a part of our heritage. So, and now we're understanding that the desire to dramatize and to act out what Aristotle calls mimesis, that miming, that mimicking of reality, is in everybody. We all want it. Children want to do it. As they're sitting in their seats, which is why I couldn't get through school, it was just, I tell my people that my dad is bald because of me. I made him rub all of his hair out because I did not want to do anything but be creative. And so many of your children, not one who's daydreaming, he's probably thinking about something, she is probably thinking about something she's going to make up at recess or when she gets home from school. Tap into that. Bring it into the classroom. So it's instinctive for every child. But I want to give you, again, this is a tool, so you can go into your classroom understanding what you're dealing with no matter who is in your room, no matter what home life they're from, no matter the shade of their skin, no matter their culture. And even this can be applied to children who are immigrants, just not from here. And I hope you can process it that way, because we want to get this education to everyone. So we have the instinct, but there's another layer that maybe we fail to understand with Black children and children of color, is we don't always feel like this is our culture. This is our home. Now, that's not anything I can debate about. I can only tell you this is my life experience. And as an educator, the guardian of children's hearts and minds, we have to be sensitive to that, this other layer. And I feel like Dunbar, Paul Laurence Dunbar, really expresses it well when he says, because this is what many of us do. I went to predominantly white schools, and I feel this. We wear the mask that grins and lies It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile, with torn and bleeding hearts, we smile. And mouth with myriad subtleties, why should the world be overwise and counting all our tears and sighs? Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask. We smile, but oh great Christ, our cries to thee from tortured souls arise. We sing, but oh the clay is vile beneath our feet and long the mile. But let the world dream otherwise. We wear the mask. Most children of color, most families of color, wear a mask. It is a coping mechanism, right? The curriculum in most schools does not reflect our story. The world around us does not reflect an appreciation for who we are. And in order to survive and to progress, we learn the information, we pass all the tests, we learn all the literature. This is one of the reasons why Black people resisted when I went into classical education, because there is another story of Blacks learning classics to forget, to deny. Can you imagine? There are stories of Black people calling their own people the N-word because they don't speak classically. They don't know this type of education. And so there's that story. But all of it is a mask, a dramatization, a mimicking of the world they're forced to live in, all the while crying on the inside, feeling unseen, unappreciated, feeling, as Du Bois says, that they have to be in this double consciousness. At school, yes, Miss So-and-so, I know all my Latin conjugations. Then they go home and they listen to hip hop. Yes. And and it's like two worlds. It's a mask. It's a mask. But when you introduce drama, the masks come off for everyone. As they mime or mimesis the story, a catharsis happens. An energy is tapped into, sometimes hurt. I've seen students cry as we dramatize a story that maybe hits a little too close to home, but there's a relief, and there's an enlightenment, and there's hope. Somehow no longer having to wear that mask because they can release it in the drama. They are liberated. And in the drama, they're able to give voice to what they feel. And so drama is a source of therapy. That child who once told me, I'm never going to finish school. My father didn't get anything but a 7th grade education, and he's not around. Why do I need this? But when he's dramatizing the Bacchae, or dramatizing Othello, and he's feeling Othello's pain, in his pain, he is liberated. So this is what I did. This is what I've been doing. I married the two. My research is about the relevancy of classical education, but then I came back to the drama, and I said, now I'm going to show you, though, how I use drama to help these students who had no interest in this, no families who supported this interest, understand things like the Peloponnesian War. How I use drama to get them to appreciate the questions of Socrates. And I had about 5 or 6 students. And it was really important for me to show not how this is being used while they're young. The ones who participated in my study were adults. They had graduated, were in college or beyond. And they had taken me probably for 6 years. 3 to 6 years was their span. And they talked about this evolution that happened as we read various pieces of literature, and they were able to dramatize them. And then as we talked through that experience, they decided they wanted to create a play called The Table. And we were away. I took them away for a retreat. We sat around and talked. My husband recorded everything. We transcribed everything. And out of that weekend experience, we developed a play where we performed it at the University of Maryland called The Table. And my former students sat around us in a circle at this table, and they wore masks. One of them wore masks such as, I feel like I'm ugly. I don't want anyone to know that I don't think I'm smart. And then they would put on the mask to just say back what the teacher wanted to say. But eventually, the play shows the masks get laid on the table, and they are living and speaking as themselves. Why? Why is that? And I think it goes back to that instinct for us to mimic it. And then when we mimic it, it kind of becomes a part of who we are. And you get to know your students as they talk through this. There was this one moment where we took the play of Othello, then we took the story called Cornrows, which tells the story of cornrows, and how cornrows tells the story of our journey through the Middle Passage into America, and how we had to reclaim that hairstyle because they were taken out of our hair when we were brought here. So we would have no connection to Africa. And we took those two and we talked about identity and being secure in who you are no matter what you're going through. And from that, this play came out that the students recreated called Revenge Anonymous. I thought that was so creative. And they created this play on not being bitter because of racism. Not being bitter when people have hurt you. Don't be like Othello, who ruined his life thinking someone was against him and wanting to seek revenge and ended up destroying his own life. And so this whole play was created. Do you see this picture? They're reading Othello. That's academic work. But it touched their hearts. And they began to discuss and dramatize what are other things you can do besides revenge, fighting. I have seen students come into the school wanting to punch somebody every time they look at them wrong. To, can we talk about why I'm offended by what you said? And I have this one student, and I'm almost done, who says to me, aren't you proud of me, Miss Anika? I let my students call me Miss Anika. Aren't you proud of me? Remember the day when I used to just punch people for everything? I said, yes, and I really, thank you, God. I'm glad those days are gone. I'm talking it out now. I said, I see you. But it's again the classroom. And for him to say, aren't you proud of me, Miss Anika? Remember when? That he can now have a discussion and a dialogue. Why? Because in maybe these stories we've read, he realizes revenge is not the answer. It's not the way to solve our problems. That there is a peaceful way to address all of our issues. Or when we talk about the Peloponnesian War and I divide students up, the Athenians and the Greeks. And we make up this kind of weird dramatization / Olympic competition strategy thing that the students created themselves. And then we sit down and we talk about thinking before you act, strategizing to accomplish a task so that you are successful. These stories of the Canon, and of course my personal favorite, the stories of the texts of ancient Greece and Rome, are human stories. They're not black stories or white stories. They're human beings' stories, saying how they have overcome various heartache, how they have been able to work through their trials. When we sit down and look at Socrates and how he talks through and questions to get to the answer, they're learning to do the same thing. And I love it when my son, who has a very quick temper, now instead of, and he drives his older cousin and his little brother absolutely insane with this. So, you took my sock. Why did you do that? And my youngest son is a person of few words. So when my son does this questioning thing, he'll say, Mommy, make him stop, please. He keeps asking me too many questions. And then my nephew, who's 2 years older than my son, just throws something at him. Auntie Nika, could you tell him to stop, please? But he is mimesis. He's been in my school, he's been with me, and he is imitating nature. Art imitates nature. He is now embodying another way. We learn alternatives to our behavior, to thinking, and then we desire to do something more with our lives. It provides a way out. And so when I was working through this with my students, we were able to categorize the process that children go through or students go through when they come into my class of reading great books, which is always infused with drama and education, to the end. And so they put it in these categories. The first one was, when I first come in, it's called When the Flame Catches. Let me make sure I'm saying this right. Yes. Oh, no, the flickering light. The first phase is the flickering light. I come in, I'm a human being, I have feelings, I have emotions, I have a little bit of an attitude that I gotta take this class, but I'm here. The light is flickering. Like when the power's about to go out and you're like, I don't know, am I gonna lose this one, or am I gonna really catch this one? The second part of the phase is when the flame catches. And if you analyze your students as you go through this journey, you will see an evolution. When the flame catches, all of a sudden the light bulb goes off. All of a sudden they understand the literature and identify with the literature. And drama and education was the tool to help make that happen for you. And they are so into this. And then finally, they're being in the light. They can now begin to visualize themselves more than what they thought they were. That young lady that says, I don't think I'm that smart, is now a CPA. That young man who struggled with just being insecure because he was really smart and hanging out with older students because he had to be skipped, is now a graduate of the University of Maryland and runs his own acrobatic association. He used to love to do backflips, and he was like a black belt, but he turned it into a business. He's being in the light. And one of the things they would say while being in this light, once they got into the light, they said it was frustrating because they were in the light, but then they began to lose friends. They also said we couldn't find people to date. Because I'm being in this enlightenment. My eyes are open. I experienced it at St. John's when I sat in that first seminar class. Wow. And they experienced being in that light. And they'll say, I don't want to just talk about the latest tennis shoe and song. I want to talk about poetry and politics and life. And then finally, the lived experience shining into the present. How did this experience of dramatizing, of mimesis, of catharsis as you express your thoughts through the play? Well, it begins to affect how you live. I have a student who went on to, his major was at first computer engineering. And he said when he was in his classes, the classes were hard, and this was in the study, the teacher wanted to know why he was able to understand the book. Most of the classes, his classmates would have to ask him, how do you understand this? And he said, it's because of what you had us read. That practice of working through difficult literature and thinking critically about the literature and dramatizing it and being in it and immersing ourselves in this with our bodies, with our voices, not just sitting down and listening to you lecture about it, but we came into it. And I'm able to read that way. And so this is what happened. And it was so exciting to see these students be able to articulate how the literature changed their life. They were able to see there's more for themselves. And so this is why the struggle between drama and education and classical education was hard for me at first. But then when I began to put them in their proper perspective, classical education is the philosophy, it is the foundation. It is the education that will set our children free. And I'm not saying that from a political stance. I'm not saying that because I want to deny my heritage. My ancestors showed, Martin Luther King showed me that. Frederick Douglass showed me that. Anna Julia Cooper has shown me that. Phyllis Wheatley showed me that this literature will set us all free. I have that part. Now, how do I give it? What is a tool I can use to open that up for my students beyond just knowing that history? Instead of me just saying, you better read these books so you can go to college, so you can do well in life. No, read these books because they are life. They tell the human story. Drama helps me do that. And so I want to encourage you in your schools that with literature, especially with history, think of ways of, get out your seat, let's dramatize this scene from this story. And then let's sit down and have a Socratic dialogue about that experience. What did you feel? Have you ever gone through this before in your life? Matter of fact, dramatizing stories could even help us understand the cultural stories of people who don't look like us. Because they could begin to, just like black people could read classics, even though they were written by people who didn't look like them, Frederick Douglass says, I could read them and I could see myself in that. When you use drama as a tool, you help your students, all of them, embody what's happening there and maybe even understand the story of those who don't look like them. When art imitates nature, school is more than just a place to just fill our minds, to memorize for a test. We are changing minds. More importantly, we are changing hearts. We have the philosophy. Now I encourage you, beyond the play that you may do once or twice or 3 times a year, bring it into your classroom. Find ways to have students dramatize the literature, the history. Do tableaus where when they're reading a piece of history or reading a piece of literature, you can say, get kids in groups together and say, now, quickly, stand in a frozen position that you feel represents what we just talked about or what we just read, and you'll have students go like this. And then they're standing there frozen. You can hear me. They're standing there frozen, and you can walk around and say, okay, now tell me what this tableau is. Well, this is when the redcoats did X, Y, Z, or this is when Odysseus was trying to kill the Cyclops, or, and this is them embodying. It's not just in the mind, it's not just memorizing what you want them to know. They have become the character, and once they become the character, they learn from the character. And it becomes a part of how they make decisions and how they live their life and chart their way forward. Classical education is the philosophy. It is the foundation. Drama is the tool to welcome everyone to the space. Thank you.
Got it. So we do have just a couple of minutes for a question or two. So if anyone would like to come right up here to the stick mic in the front between the cameras, Dr. Prather has offered to give it her best.
Thank you. That was utterly inspiring. Could you speak to a moment when aesthetic force moved you in your life?
Ooh. I'm trying to figure out which story I want to tell. I think I know this is not a religious conference, but I'm just going to tell my personal experience. So I hated school my whole life, okay? Like pre-K through 12. I remember being in pre-K saying, I hate this place. Why did I want to become a teacher, though? Like, I wanted to be a teacher since I was little. I'm trying to understand that. Maybe I wanted to reach students like me. But my mom and dad were so awesome. They didn't, like, they were constantly, they knew I loved the arts. They were constantly having me go into arts, and they never took that away from me, no matter what my performance was. And so the arts was everything to me, and it still is. And so my best friend is the same way as I. We're still best friends. We've been friends since she was 2 and I was 1. And, she's an actual actress. That's her background. And she says, we decided to create this play for our church of being best friends and one of us having one faith and the other one having another faith. And that, for some reason, we both broke down crying in the middle of the play. We wrote it together, practiced it, and performed it for our church. And it was a very moving play. I'm not going to go into all the details of it, just to keep it neutral. But it moved us. That's when I realized the power of theater, to teach. Because it was supposed to teach about faith and theology, and it just taught about friendship, sacrifice, taught a lot of things that people were all moved by. And we were probably in college somewhere at that time. And it was around that time that I changed my minor to theater. So my major was education, my minor was theater. And that has been on my mind, that theater is a tool for teaching. And that probably just really shifted my whole view on education. And this is the other thing I want to say to that. Great Hearts is amazing. I was listening to a lot of the principals up here. Toyin was up here. And you all were talking about how much of an emphasis you place on the arts. What a beautiful thing, because when I came out of college, and I was really excited about using the arts in the classroom, all of the principals I worked for, when they would hire me, they would see my resume, and then after I got my master's in theater at NYU and talked about how I want to use it in the classroom, everyone said, you can't do that here. There's no time. There's no time. That's all nice. They would say, that's all nice, but there's no time for that here. And if I ever did it, because I'm stubborn, it was always a meeting in the principal's office. But you have a school where you can freely bring in the arts. It changes lives. So yeah, that would probably be the most impactful moment for me.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I literally came to this conference for you.
Oh, thank you.
You have no idea what you just did to me this morning. And I need you to know that.
Thank you.
I'm a classical school principal in Maryland.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm in Maryland.
I'm in Frederick.
Okay, we need to talk.
Definitely. And time after time after time, I constantly come to find the thing to do to make my babies care.
Yes.
And when I have a K through 8 school, so when we bring them in and we fill them early, it is wonderful.
Yes.
When my children transition in from the school district and they've never been through classical education,
Yes.
they're looking at me like this. What you want me to do with that?
Yes.
Why I care about that? What
Right.
that got to do with me? I don't want to
Yes.
do this.
Yes.
So I constantly am looking for ways to empower teachers to give it to students in a way for them to care.
Yeah.
Give it to students so that they can connect with the literature, love the literature,
Yes.
and truly get a classical experience. Because without it, it is an inequitable experience.
It is, yes.
So everything you said from I love the arts, that was me, hated school, that was that girl, I got a PhD, that was a miracle, right? So it was all of that. And I just in this moment, when I listened to you, I said, I know now what I'm going to say to my staff. I came here for you. Thank you. You are amazing. And don't let anybody tell you anything else here.
We'll end on that one. Okay, one more question. This will be the last one.
Okay.
This is Lindsay.
Anika, thank you so much. I'm sorry, I get very emotional.
I'm emotional too, so I'm with you.
What you said is exactly the reason why I'm here, why I teach theater. Even for a privileged white girl, as a little child, theater was what woke me up, right? It made my heart come alive.
Yep.
And that's why I love to do what I do with these students. And I have kind of a practical question, though, because I teach theater as it's a semester-long course,
Right.
and so we're constantly clipping through. We need to get through the rehearsals,
Yeah.
and we need to build the sets and all of this kind of stuff. And sometimes all of those practical things, we can lose focus
Yes.
on what's going on inside that pedagogy.
Yes.
I love it when it's just sort of spontaneous in the classroom. How can we not lose sight of that?
Right.
How can we see the excellence of our artifact,
Yes.
this play that we're putting on deeply within the human soul, such that the excellence isn't just how beautiful the play itself is, but what's happening in these children?
Yes. So I'm going to answer that, but I'm hoping you can do what I'm going to say. What I've always done is I've always made, no matter what school I've worked in, the play was connected to what's going on in the classroom. Now that might be hard. My schools have always been small. So if there's a way that you can make it more than just, this is the play we're getting ready for this certain time of the year, somehow it is connected to something that's being learned somewhere in the school. And so for us, I remember one year we read Prometheus Bound. So one thing I do too with the literature, so I'm always showing how it's relevant to my students, is whenever we read a Black author, I also have a rule. It's not that I'm being, rejecting all literature, but when I read Black literature, they have to be an author that had an appreciation for the canon. That's just a rule to stay consistent with classical education. And my people struggle with that, but they're gonna have to deal with it. This is the philosophy I've chosen. So and when we do that, that really opens it up really great. So we read Prometheus Bound because A Raisin in the Sun, Lorraine Hansberry, has one line where Walter's sisters, Benita's boyfriend, gets irritated with Walter because he's being so stubborn, and he says, "Good night, Prometheus." And I said, well, we're gonna have to read Prometheus then. And they were able to identify with the stubbornness of Walter. Walter was trying to do the best for his family, may not have been going about it the wisest way, but his heart was in the right place. Prometheus was being stubborn too, and it messed up his life too, but his heart was in the right, and they were able to make these connections. Then we went from that and actually performed A Raisin in the Sun. But it was a literature lesson. So that's one way, and then the other way is this. Now this might take a little bit longer, is, how can I explain this in this short amount of time? If you go to, sometimes we've done things where there's a series of plays representing grade levels. So maybe first through third have a production. I don't know how you all do it, so I can't visualize it. And then that production, though, is based on either a literature lessons or history. And the production, it gets messy, but it comes out beautifully if you could just go with this really quick. But it's based on something they create. So you are there, instead of you having this, here's the script, let's work on this and do this play, they are creating the script. Now you have to start a little earlier than you would normally start because it gets a little messy for a while. But the evolution is amazing, and the way they get excited about what's going on in the classroom because they're practicing it. So if you tell your teachers, you're partnering with your teachers, and if you tell your teachers, hey, I have this idea that for the end of the school year play, we're gonna do 3 short plays for the different groups or whatever that are in your, and this is the curriculum. These groups are maybe covering this part of history or this type of literature, and this group is doing this. And you want to do creative drama in the classroom. The teachers can do this. You don't have to be a drama person to do this. Where as you're reading the history lessons or the theater lessons, have them do little dramatizations and find a way to document that, keep hold of that. Then they will bring that to you. This is what our group came up with. This is what our group came up with. And it starts off with a lot of discussion. So what would this look like as we made it into a play or a production? And in this, and we can talk more. I'm gonna give you my email if you want to talk further. But you see what you're partnering with. How do we dramatize what's going on in the classroom, and it becomes the actual school production? So they're not disconnected.